Yeah, I'll just go ahead with this. All right, you guys, in case you care, I got the videos now. So I'm going to run it through once at full speed, and you get to see how fast it is, how fast it goes by. Right? So that goes by, and you see the flip-flops on there. So magic is, because it's got a kind of a crumbly edge surface, right? So you don't want to mess with that. So I did that. Now, if I go back to the beginning again and just do that now, one of the things with this is you can stop it. And I don't know how to make it go slow, but I can make it go single frame. So
oh no, he's going to jump.
Jump, jump.
Don't, no.
Okay, so watch this. Right? Did you see all those? Now, darn it, there's a way to, how do I, oh, I know how to do that. 1 second. Yeah, okay,
what?
so there we go. So look at the frames there. Right, so I like that that little weird one right there.
A little
so
more.
wiggly, all wiggly stuff there. So that's, you see where it goes. Right, so that's all that's that funny adjustment stuff. Now then, 2 years later, just so you see, this is the slow-mo. I got this done in slow motion. This is done by the police officer, and his inspector got mad at him, obviously, because we were busy breaking the law together. So this is in Apple slow-mo. And see the difference 2 years later. Although I have a fatter belly, there's less wiggling. Look at that, look at that. So that's what happens with a bit of practice then. So anyway, there you guys go. All right, that's that. That's just, we can shut it off now.
Okay, you can cut over.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming here today. I get an opportunity to talk with these guys, and I think a lot of times when you're in a conference setting, you get very little opportunity to engage with folks in sort of a real discussion or a Q&A. So I thought, and I hope I'm right, it'd be a good opportunity to have a discussion with both Ken and Alistair. Not really meant to facilitate the session. It's really meant to get questions from the folks that are here interested in having a dialogue with these guys and them to share their stories to help across the board rather than give a presentation. So I certainly what I'm going to do is I'll get off stage and if folks have questions, I'd like you to start thinking about those. Certainly raise your hand so that we can get started. I can certainly get them wound up too, I'm sure, to get started as well. And I will do that at least right now to get started. So Allistair, one of the things that I was talking to Ken about, and I was interested in getting your perspective is, with the Agile Alliance and when that started, and just conferences in general, I don't think you get credit, I don't know if you do, for really formalizing not only that organization after the manifesto was signed, but having sort of the thought process to get pulled together a small conference. I don't know necessarily where it was, Utah, Salt Lake City, and sort of, what you did to get that started, what you see as a successful conference, what type of content growth you've seen at the conferences that you've gone to, and just some background on the Agile Alliance and how you got started there. And then I'm gonna get off the stage here and get moving and have a few other questions.
All right, very good. Thank you. So I had nothing to do with the starting of the Agile Alliance. That was Ken's baby. I'm kind of, especially in those days, I was shy. I didn't want to get into that shy about commercial crap, right? So,
yeah.
So the way it went with the Agile Manifesto, the session, and not everybody knows this, but I had been in a couple of sessions organized by a guy called John Hopkins, 94, 95. And he created a very small workshop called Workshop on Object-Oriented Design, Wood. And he held them up in Snowbird in 94, 95, 93, 94, 95, 96, something like that. And I got invited. I didn't actually get invited. I moved to Salt Lake City, and I knew Ward Cunningham. I had just met Ward Cunningham, and they were holding it up in Snowbird, just above my house. So I asked him, with great timidity, if I could gate crash this thing, because I wasn't in anybody at the time. And he said, sure, come along. So at that particular meeting, there was Adele Goldberg, Kenny Rubin, Martin Fowler introduced himself there as saying, I'm the only person here I've never heard of. That was the way he spoke about it. Ivar Jakobsen was there, Larry Constantine was there, Ward Cunningham was there, Kent Beck was there, all these people. And we had a certain particular format that we ran for those 2 days. We did that in 94, we did it in 95. And then when I was in Norway for a year in 98, I held the same format thing on a cruise ship, on a boat that goes in the fjords in Norway. So we did the same thing. So it was 2000, we hadn't had such a thing, so I was going to hold the next equivalent, and I had an event, invitee list and a set of topics. And then Bob Martin wrote and said, hey, I want to write a manifesto. I think that there's something going on here. And I looked, and his invitation list was better than mine, and his topic was better than mine, so I threw in with him. And then all Jim Highsmith and I had to do was to make sure that we didn't go to Chicago in February, which is a really bad time to be in Chicago, but instead we went to Snowbird, which we did. So I was like on the ground, organizer for the thing, but the theme was given to us by Bob Martin. So that's a little piece of background not everybody knows. And then in 2000, that was 2001, in 2002, a guy called David Spann held a one-day conference on Agile at Westminster College at the Gore School of Business. And that was actually the first official conference that I know of. And then I wanted to create a conference modeled after OOPSLA. So I went to the OOPSLA conference all through the 90s, and that's really where Agile stuff was born. Yep. And we always had lots and lots of topics about... You're mic'd, you know that. You have to, everything, yeah, don't fart either. They got a mic in the other place too. And so I modeled it after OOPSLA, and I wanted to make, it's really funny because I told the guys at OOPSLA, I'm going to make a conference that's going to replace OOPSLA because objects, every year would say, our object's dead, we keep doing this, do we stop the conference? I said, I'm going to make the replacement conference, and it's going to be about Agile, and they went, yeah, okay. So, but I was right and they were wrong on that particular one. So I created the first one. We had a lot of trouble because the extreme programming one was at the same time there was a competition between the two. But the XP one is about really for programmers and about XP, and I wanted all roles, all methodologies, like all everybody's, all inclusiveness, like the whole big tent stuff. And was needing a sponsor for this, and this is when Ken said, he already had the Agile Alliance up and running, and said, this is perfect, we want to sponsor this. This is going to be great. We want to do this. And the idea was that it was going to be the economic engine for the Agile Alliance, which it has been, and create a lot of money for the Agile Alliance, which it has done. And the idea was then the Agile Alliance would take the money and do a lot of community services, which I haven't seen yet. So I just assumed the bank account must be really, really big. It's a nonprofit, but it turns out you can hold a lot of money as a nonprofit. Yeah. You don't actually, it can kind of balloon out, and you don't actually have to do anything with the money for a long time. So I keep waiting for them to do that. And then I did help to write the Declaration of Interdependence, and we created at that time the Agile Project Leadership Network, and we asked if we could like co-share the conference so we could get an economic motor for that, but that didn't ever pan out, and so that's kind of gone separate ways like that. Now, the design of the 2003 conference, the people who've been there, who went to that 2003, never forget it. They say it's the best conference that they've ever been to.
Absolutely.
And you were there, right?
Yep.
And why was that? Well, partly we only had about 250 people.
Right.
We had 11 tracks or something. It was modeled, it was created as a big conference, and we just barely broke even. But there's a particular guy called Todd Little who works for Landmark Oil Exploration. And he and his buddy, whose name I can't recall, looked at my plan. So I had a 3-day or a 4-day conference all tight with stuff. And they said, no, Allistair, so they totally taught me. They said, no, Allistair, you've got it wrong. You've got no space in there for people. You just got wall-to-wall sessions. You have to change that. Yeah. And there's a social engineering factor, social factor you have to take into account. And I will tell you, most conferences totally forget this. So we had the opening night modeled after their conferences. They said the people don't know each other when they come together. So the first night you have to do anything to get them together. So we had an opening session. We had belly dancers. We had flamethrowers. We had cartoonists. We had different types of things for people, with the food and so on, so that the people would interact. And they loved it so much that, unfortunately, you guys know what a cargo cult is. It's where you just follow things blindly and you don't know why anything stuff. That they had belly dancers for the next 3 years because they thought the belly dancers was the secret sauce, right? That the guys need to look at, semi-naked women in order to feel at home. It's not the point at all. We were doing things to get people to talk, and the people met each other standing in line to getting the caricature done or watching the juggler or whatever. And I very deliberately had no keynote on the first morning, because when you have a keynote, you have no shared experience. Everybody's sitting there. I said, no, we want maximum shared experience. So we had our workshops, half-day and quarter-day workshops the first morning, And my goal was that people would talk to each other, in the night before. And when they went to lunch in the first day, they already had something to exchange notes about. What session were you in, and trade notes. So we had the keynote in the afternoon on the first day. In the afternoon of the second day, we had just go away, literally. So we had open space or go away. And so we actually organized hikes in the hills, some people from mountains, some people came over to my house for a picnic and a walkabout. There was some, people went to pub crawls, anything. We said, get out and talk to each other. What the job is to get out and talk to each other. You're overdosed already after a day and a half. And then we went, and then instead of having the banquet on the second night, we had it on the third night. And as Todd Little said to me, make it so good that anybody who leaves before the banquet one year will never leave before the banquet another year. So we had these guys organized it. They had incredible show going and like that. So what happened in conferences after that is the first thing the people who took over after me is they took out the wasted space on the second afternoon, right? The non-productive time. They filled that immediately with workshops and lost all of that. And then they went cargo cult on the belly dancers, and then they moved, of course, the conference party so they went very, very standard, right? We had a meeting a couple years later. Some people said, "Hey, Allistair, we love that conference. What do we do to make sure we have a successful, really great conference every time?" We spent a couple of days talking about it, and here's the bad news: the reason it was so good was because it was unexpected. And that means just like with the stock market, you have to exceed expectations every time. Mm-hmm. So if you ever do something good twice in a row, people expect it, right? And then they'll feel sated. And then
not just bigger.
Not just bigger, it has to be exponentially bigger, better, weirder, wilder, or something. Like Burning Man's all ho-hum now, right? Because I've been to it twice. That's the same as it was 2 years ago. It's not as good as it was 2 years ago. So sorry for the long answer, but since you're organizing conferences and some of you care about those things.
There's a reason why I was talking with Bart about that. And you know how you look back on things that have happened and you have regrets and things you wish you had done differently. And at the time, the Agile Alliance was nothing. I mean, it was like you said, let's form something because all sorts of people are saying, hey, we want to join this Agile movement. We're like, join what? And there was nothing to join. So we finally, I think Ward put up a wiki where people could enter their names and said, I'm supporting, I join. It's good.
Yeah.
And at the time, Mary Poppendick, who was a visionary, very smart person, but don't borrow money from her. You can't afford the vigorish.
No.
And so we wanted some way to get this going, and this is where Allistair came in and created a conference which took over the essence, the spirit of collaboration, people working together on a shared idea, which was just brilliant. And it, more than anything, like as Allistair said, funded the Agile Alliance, and they then went on and did a different conference model, which became standard conference speakers, lots of money that funded them. But the reason I brought up Mary's penurious style, and the reason I wanted to mention this now is, Allistair, you must have busted your butt for about 3 months on that conference.
No, 14.
14 months?
Yeah.
How much did you get paid for that?
About 20,000.
I don't think it was even that much.
No, I don't know. But yeah,
it
cost me a lot.
$20.
It was, yeah. Well, yeah, there's money out of pocket, lost revenue, all that stuff, yeah.
Because the whole thing back then, no one knew what a nonprofit was. We all thought that nonprofits were places where, no one made money and all work was for volunteer. And we could not get anyone paid.
Yeah.
And so one of the issues after the second year was, okay, we're going to have a big conference, but no one's going to get paid. So guess who then started dominating the conference? The people who used it as ways of advertising their own wares.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we lost the essence that you have here at COHAA of a community event which is driven toward people talking and working together to share ideas. You have COHAA, you have people doing this. This is a hard thing to do. And you don't do it so that you can have a fancy house in the hills and starlets at your beck and call. And I think the reason why I brought this up is I want to thank you for doing that, because without that, there is a good likelihood none of this would have happened.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good.
So
You get your island in the Bahamas, and you'll invite me.
Next question, then, and then I'm going to open it up. People, please raise your hand after I get this question so I can get to you. So, what do you say to the folks? State of Agile. It's obviously it's nice to hear some of the origins of even these type of events. What do you say to the folks? And there are adamant folks out there, even to this day, that says, and I know Allistair, you mentioned a little bit of this, and Ken certainly, that waterfall is more efficient than Agile, and I mean very specifically to metrics and to delivery dates, and there are certainly the folks that do this are very good at waterfall. And not even just a scale question, just a philosophical question. How do you guys view that? How do you look at that? How do you answer that question? How's that question's changed? The answer of that question changed over the last even 2 or 3 years.
You go first, because I got a long answer.
This is about waterfall.
Yeah. Name anything good about waterfall.
It's like my mother-in-law. I never said a bad thing about her. It's like asking for. We used to, I remember, give presentations, and it was like talking about what the ideas behind Agile and Scrum and all that were, and why it was useful and successful. And we would have maybe half the audience just outraged, just furious. Like, how can you say that, because we do this with waterfall, and we do that with waterfall, and without that, you can't do this, and without that, you can't know that, and without this. And I used to try giving cogent discussions, and it wasn't that. It was kind of like saying to someone that their child might be defective. You get a pretty strong response. And so at some point I said, look, I'm sure waterfall has its home ground, the place where it's really effective, because it came from standard manufacturing practices, and if you have a situation where that's appropriate, use it, for God's sake. I'm not saying you shouldn't use waterfall. I'm saying here's another approach that if you have complex software development where there's a lot of changes and a lot of complexity, this might be more appropriate. Try it. And so a lot of this, I think, for me, what angered me about waterfall was it was applied everywhere. And to me, it took what I had enjoyed as one of the greatest professions in the world, where you could take really obtuse, obscure ideas and try to bring them to bear into something that was real, and it took it and ruined it. It tried mechanizing it. And so to me, Agile and Scrum were the resurrection of our profession. It didn't mean that waterfall was inherently and overall bad. It meant that what I loved, it had ruined.
All right, so I'm going to do a Ken Schwaber, because last time I did this on stage, he surprised me. He would go out to the audience and ask them to noodle over the question. So I'm going to ask all of you at your tables, spend just about 2 minutes and name the things anything that you don't like about Agile, any of the downsides of Agile, and then we'll kind of shout that out. So 2 minutes, on your marks, get set, go. Good. Our timekeeper has called us on the 2 minutes. He doesn't want you guys to have too much fun.
Go
You guys
ahead.
have to.
This one starting here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, very good, very good. Thank you. Just call them out fast. Yeah.
Okay, so something I don't like about Agile is its name. I can't stand
Thank you very
it.
much. You don't have to explain. Next. We got a lot of people. I can do this too, Bart.
Go ahead.
No. I mean, you've got the mic. Just go table to table. Go to the next table. Just go to the next table and hand it to someone. What you guys got?
Sometimes it's a little too light in documentation.
Light on documentation. Thank you. Next. If you guys have got several from your table, just call them out. You didn't discuss. All right, no problem. Oh, yeah, she has her hand up there. Bart, she's got her hand up right there.
Agile and distributed teams.
Okay, very good. Agile and distributed teams.
Yeah, with the trust issues.
Trust issues, okay?
Sometimes not enough focus on data migration or conversion.
Not enough focus on data migration. Okay, next table. Okay, get a couple things, call them out.
I think when people think they have to apply all of this prescriptive process, even what doesn't make sense for them.
That's an interesting statement, given what I said this morning. Thank you.
Two things. So first, I think even though we've got some great frameworks and processes, it's very difficult to be able to scale Agile.
Difficult to scale. Okay.
Right.
We don't need explanation. We don't need preamble. We need the list.
Right. And then over here, she had also mentioned it's hard to get executive buy-in and
hard to get executive buy-in. Okay.
Yeah.
Over here. Yeah. Keep this man running, people. Call it out. Whatever you got, shout it out. Get ready, right? You know the mic's coming. It's not a surprise anymore.
Functional and production-ready code by the end of every sprint.
Say one.
Functional and production-ready code by the end of every sprint.
Function and production-ready code by the end of sprint. Thank you. So far, what I'm hearing are objections to weak implementations of Agile, not to Agile in its essence. But let's keep going.
Too much dogma.
Too much dogma. Thank you. Behind you. Too much dogma.
Lack of a clear definition of what it is.
Lack of a clear definition. Thank you. None of these are objections to Agile as I understand it. Why is he not going to give it to Chris?
Makes people who do annual budgets uncomfortable.
I'm sorry, there's a real echo in here.
Oh, sorry. Makes people that do annual budgets uncomfortable.
Makes people who do annual budgets uncomfortable. Thank you. We have one at the front table. Okay, you guys at the back table, get ready. You right?
People's fear of transparency.
People's fear of transparency. Ooh, that one's intrinsic, all right. That's a nice one. Thank you.
Return on investment, or possibly make sense for the industry?
Return on investment would be low in Agile, is what you're saying, or possibly what?
You guys good? Does it make sense for the industry?
Does it make sense for the industry? Thank you. Anybody else? You guys, raise your hand at this point if you want the mic. We've had a bunch. Otherwise, we're going to close it down. If you don't raise your hand, he won't come to your table. 3, 2, 1, down. Okay, good deal. So I have a 3-day class I called Advanced Agile Workshop. And the first question I ask in that class is, why is Agile less efficient than Waterfall? And people usually look, to go outside and see if they came in the right room, that maybe it's the PMI room and not the Agile room or something like that. But I assure them that I'm dead serious, and they have to give a correct answer. And it has to be a correct answer because I'm going to debate with them about whether it's correct or not correct. And you can imagine how much fun that is sometimes for these people. And why do I do this? Well, the reason I do this is because we're afraid to actually level decent criticism. We're afraid to have a balanced discussion. And I can, as I say, I can barely defend something I think is true. I for sure can't defend something that I think is not true. So I'm not going to go around and try to say that something is true about Agile, which it isn't true. The exact trigger for this question was the night before. I had been at a big dinner with the sponsors, and one of them was a former Anderson Consulting exec who was now in this other thing, and he waited till after dinner and drinks, and we were all mellow and stuff, and he leans across the table at me and he says, I have to tell you, you Agile guys make no sense to me. I mean, you get some requirements and you do some design, you code it up, you test it, then you change your requirements, you change your design, you change your code, you test it again, you change the requirements again, you change the design again, you change, just get all the requirements, design it up, and oh my gosh, code it. For God's sake. Why do you just keep doing that? Doesn't make any sense to me. And I said to him, you're right. It doesn't make any sense, right? That sounds really inefficient, doesn't it? And I got so excited about that, and he was actually in my advanced class the next day, that I took this question to the class, and I made them all answer it. I made them all answer it because it's a straight question. And the kinds of, so I've been doing this now for a couple of years, like for 3 years. It's the stock standard opening question. If any of you come to my advanced class, you will be asked to answer this question and defend your answer. And then the next day we flip it around and say, why is Waterfall less efficient than Agile? We look for the matching answer so we get a balanced discussion. But the first one is rework. Hello, rework? Do you know the amount of rework we suck up in Agile? Why do we do that? I mean, that is inefficient. If there's anything that's hard to defend in Agile, it's the amount of rework we do. That's straight up. How about meetings? Are you guys not dying for all the meetings? You've got these 30-minute daily stand-ups in which you sit down, right? And you got all these, 2 days to do a planning session for a sprint or whatever you're doing in one day. You lose 3 days out of 10.
Alistair, isn't that called talking to each other?
Yeah, Yeah, except for, do you need 30 minutes a day? Do you
No.
need 30 minutes a day?
No one says you have to do it for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
You say you should get together to see where you are so
Right.
you do the right thing the next day.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. So the point is we got that. So the thing is that Agile, by its very nature, has got more communication. So if we look at what are the advantages of waterfall, waterfall is optimized for cost.
Yep.
Well-run Agile project will cost more and deliver faster. And I've got that in one of my books. I was very surprised. I did the Gantt charts and all the rest, and I did the math, and it kind of shocked me. So if you want cost optimization, you go with waterfall. And if you want speed optimization, you go with Agile, but you pay more. And there are different domains and times where you can get the reduction. When your uncertainty about what to build is low enough, you can tolerate the extended rework that might happen in waterfall. There are things that we've done over and over often enough that we actually don't have to plan for rework.
Obamacare.
Obamacare, right. Thank
Oh,
you very
right,
much.
that didn't work.
Very good. Okay, so and there's a wonderful book called Simultaneous Management by a guy called Alex Laufer, and if I was going to teach a project management course at grad school, I would use that as the textbook. He's from civil engineering, and he built hospitals and runways and all kind of stuff. And chapter 1 is basically a waterfall-based management. Chapter 2 is basically agile-style management. And he wrote this before we had agile. And chapter 3 is how to blend the two. And he talked about building runways, airports in the jungles in monsoon season. Now, when you do monsoon season stuff, you can't make a Gantt chart. You can't plan on what you're going to get. And you run the rework, high rework, opportunistic based. And when it dries up, then you go straight waterfall and you do cost schedule optimization, resource optimization. So there's the answer. There's an answer, right? But it's interesting because we get lots of answers. We get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Post-it notes that passed exam. And I take pictures and I put them on Twitter. And then people hate me because I said anything negative about Agile. And I go, you just come into my class and let's have that discussion. Yeah. So thanks for that question, because it's when people finish that exercise, they feel liberated to have a properly balanced discussion about the pros and cons of any idea without fear of, I like Agile, but I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't have any downside. That was my long answer. All my answers are long, sorry.
It reminds me of saying you don't like anything, there's something wrong with it. Agile has become a catchword. So if you go back to the Agile Manifesto, it's got some values and it's got some principles. Those are rarely referred to. Instead, it becomes a word that becomes a striking, a lightning rod for dissension. I like Agile. No, I don't like Agile. You're a bad person because you don't like Agile. You're a good person because... What are you talking about? You don't like the value of don't do documentation if it doesn't make sense and isn't needed for sustainability? Or are you saying that you don't like collaborating? You know, it becomes the religious thing of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin rather than a rational discussion about something.
So somebody asked me one time, when would you not use Agile? And I said, I have a hard time thinking of it. He said, how about avionics? And I said, there's a good example right there. Yeah, avionics would be a great place to reduce the Agile. So in some of these things where speed and flexibility isn't your main priority, where let's say defect freedom, safety is your main priority, then Agile becomes a good mix-in method where you want to be able to have the fluidity up to a certain point and you want to let it harden slowly after a certain point. Then you do a priority shift, and in the early parts of the project, Agile's your friend, and in the late parts of your project, Agile's not your friend.
So those of you who are here this morning, I talked about this a little with scaling. And I also mentioned I happen to have a Tesla, which is probably more software than Bank of America. But they invest hugely in the architecture and the backplate that works on an NVIDIA processor, and then they constantly are, just like your iPhone or your other smartphones, releasing new apps against it that give the car new capability. But they've invested in that architecture, the backplane that all this works against and becomes a stability. Because there's a fine balancing point between complexity and chaos. And if you take the need for safe operation of a car on a highway or a truck on a German Autobahn in autopilot mode with agility, people just doing it sprint by sprint by sprint, you don't have a reasonable answer. Allistair and I cannot talk without saying, and on the other hand.
Yeah, right.
So I have been in any number of next-gen projects, you know, where they sit there and they talk about, you know, we've got to re-architect our products so, you know, it can meet the future demands and become something that's competitive in the marketplace and support our customer base and kill our competition and all that. And the fair question I always ask them is, so how are you guys doing? And it's like, well, we're pretty good. We're making good progress. I say, can I see, you know, something? Oh, well, we don't have anything really we can show you. So one of the things that we put onto next gen, and avionics fits into that, and so does the backplane for the Tesla, and if you happen to have a car with any you know, smart safety equipment, same thing. It becomes a demand on the people thinking about this backplane to prove that what they're doing works. If you have to take something and turn it into something usable, guess what it does? It shows you where your thinking is shaky.
And that was the whole point of the second value of the manifesto, right? Whether it says working software, you could have said working products.
Right.
The whole point is feedback. Core level feedback.
Inspect and adapt.
Yeah. All right, good. We have a...
Yeah,
now,
we do.
We've monopolized it, and we're really hoping...
Oh, we did.
In all of this time that some of you have thought of some
We got a
questions.
question here.
Great, thank
And
you.
by the way, all of you came up with things you didn't like about Agile. Guess what? Since Agile is only defined in the values and the principles, feel free to change what you don't like, because none of the things you said is in violation of those things.
Good deal. Thank you. Question?
Yeah, so my question is related to your talk this morning, as well as what you guys were talking about with the conference. You had a common concept about the heart of Agile. Have you ever considered doing a conference where that's the message or the theme?
I would love to. I would love to. Just so you know that the stuff I showed you this morning is like a month old. And I would love to see that develop. I really do. I would be willing to do, you know, organize yet my third ever conference.
In Columbus, Ohio.
In Columbus, Ohio, for example, where the heart of Agile is the theme. Because consider it done. What's your name, please?
Jessica Soroki, I'll help you.
Okay, good deal. So Bart, make sure that I have this feeling I'll be back in Columbus, is what I have this feeling. All right.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Great question.
Do we have another question? Go ahead. Hold on a second.
By the way, it doesn't have to be a question. This is a discussion.
anything.
Feel free to make a point.
In the spirit of COHAA, can you provide an example or story where what would otherwise be like a guiding principle of Agile became a constraint that you had to discard?
Where what otherwise what?
What's usually a guiding principle in agility is something that became a constraint that you had to discard.
Had to discard. So I like the way he phrased that, by the way. When I do sort of community events these days, I like to answer questions with stories rather than just kind of mumbling away, you know, pontificating. And I ask you to help us stay on track, like by giving a specific story on any of these things. So there's 4 values of the manifesto. The first one is individuals and interactions. I'll give you one. Here's a story. It was a very small company, and this was some years. This was like maybe 2010. I'm going to pick, so it's good time after that. And there were maybe 3 or 4 programmers, and they worked out of their houses or whatever. And I met one of them, and they had absolutely no process or tool for deploying. So and they had everything just in folders, right? So whenever one of them had to make something live, they'd be on the phone, you know, trying to reach the other ones, like, which folder did you put that? What's the latest, you know, the copy of that? Da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was talking to this person, I said, you know, I know I'm an author of the manifesto, and I really hate to say this, but what you guys need are more processes and tools, you know, and less individuals and interaction. You guys are all individuals and interactions. You need a little bit more processes and tools.
Because you don't have any.
You don't have any, right? So when we built it, right, there's a substrate supposition about the processes and tools. Like as in the early days of XP, someone said that tools to XP are like tools to a parachutist. Right? You don't need many, but they better be good and they better work, right? So there's one. Do you have anywhere?
I remember a book, Drive.
Yeah.
Where they went through great companies and why people like working at them and all that. And I knew some people from Forrester who went out to all those companies because they wanted to quantify, what really made a great company to develop new products and software in. And what they found was there were very, very few commonalities. What they did find, though, were 3 commonalities. One was that they had a very, very clear purpose and vision and goal of what they wanted to accomplish. We want to bring battery capability, storage capability to homes, something like that. Second thing they found was that they hardly had purchased any of those tools. They almost always went completely open source because there they didn't have to justify the expenditure and they felt free to modify them to do what they wanted. So they were at their beck and call rather than having to do what someone else told them was good. And third, the people were insanely happy to work there and wouldn't work anywhere else.
Wow.
And it just struck me that, given the right circumstances, this is not about you guys don't have tools. It's why don't you have tools? I mean, it's not like you have to justify the expenditure. Go get the tool because there is so much information in our industry about the right way and best ways to build software. It's not for any shortcoming of information and knowledge. It's more like we have our heads down and we don't think about, how could I do this better? How could I make my company's life better? How could I make my life better?
Good.
How could I be a happy camper going to work?
Good.
Along those lines, what's your advice to people to become more emotionally, aware? More, I use the term emotional intelligence, but you can't have that level of productivity and that level of buy-in without that level of maturity. So on the people side, right, of Agile, what do you recommend for people to do to become more socially interactive within IT specifically?
That was a strange presupposition of the question. Could you state that again? Because I think I want to disagree with the presupposition inside your statement.
Sure. So I think
you said something about a level of maturity or something.
Emotional maturity. So from the standpoint of being able to take constructive feedback, being able to internalize that and improve, be able to work within a team environment, to be able to navigate a team environment if you're new to that environment.
Yes,
again, there's a level of maturity that comes along, not just with age and discipline and skill. There's also coaching and other things I think that help bring that along.
I got it.
But I think that's where a lot of teams fail. It's not necessarily
so I'm going to disagree with you whenever you let me.
Yep, go ahead.
I've marked it. I've marked it that they know I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think you need any maturity to get people excited to work together. Oh my gosh, you get kids in Cub Scouts to work together. You get college groups. You get all the volunteer groups. You get all the Eco Save the Jungle groups, right? You get any groups. They don't need any maturity. You just say that you guys want to do this. Yeah, let's go. Wow, right? So do you have interaction? Do you have energy? Do you have the property to do that? Are they delighted to work there, right? Now, that having been said, right, so I wanted to just get that. It's not a presupposition you need all that maturity in order to get energized people. No, you just get energized people because of whatever that is. Now, you've got all the energized people, and now the question is, can you benefit from growing the emotional, social maturity of them? Yes, absolutely. And this is inside, obviously, the collaborate sector of the quadrants there. Is the coaching for how to give criticism, take criticism, how to facilitate, how to participate in a facilitated meeting, all of that. That will increase things. But people do famously well just for being outrageously energized. We have a comment here. Could you give this guy the mic?
Thought about that first, and then let's get you first.
So as you said that, the thought came to mind. I hear some people say, I don't know that I agree with it, but I hear some people say there's only certain personalities that are a good fit for Agile. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, geez. So we had a team.
I'm going to agree. Do you want to disagree? You disagree and I'll agree.
I'll disagree. We have a team, and there are a couple of people who just will not talk. And the thing that works for you then is time. Of course, you let silence and time go and say, okay, so I notice you're not saying anything, Heidi. What is going on? And, it largely comes out the person doesn't feel safe. They don't like talking. They feel they're more of a person who likes to work on their own. So this isn't about everyone being an extrovert and celebrating and hugging each other. This is about people, for whoever they are, feeling safe to collaborate and work with whatever skills they have in that environment. And to say, we have my wife gave me a book about the culture of extroverts, and Dale Carnegie created that. All sorts of people can work together, and they have brains, and they just work in different ways. There's one of the values of XP that Kent really pushed, and it was courage. And it's creating an environment within which people can be courageous, and the word that goes with that usually is a safe environment. And you can't always do that, but it's to, even when it becomes unsafe, to allow it to come back to a safe thing, and to create an environment where people can be themselves without being bullied. And all you have to do is look at the Dilbert cartoon, and you can tell what our culture thinks of safety and all those other things. So this is us actually, in some ways, in a lot of ways, creating a counterculture where people can collaborate and create great things and be safe and be themselves. They don't have to be as good as their neighbor, they're good as they are. One of the things with Scrum was, well, our team's not as good as, yeah, but it is our team. How good can we do? And taking pride in that.
Two parts. I like what Ken started off with. When we say the word talk all the time, and not everybody's a verbal communicator. And I love that we want to put a recognition on the fact that communicating and collaborating is not always through speaking. And so we want to allow ways to collaborate in nonverbal fashions. And when we do the Agile Roundtable in Salt Lake City, one of the things we do, because we have some introverts in there, we'll periodically just stop and go around the circle so everybody gets to speak. And you find that somebody who's been dead silent the entire time suddenly has a lot to say. And that's even on the verbal scale, but there's nonverbal collaboration.
They're pithy.
Actually, I'm thinking of some people who actually get talking and then you can't shut them up almost. They have a lot to say, but they don't want to take over the time. So you give them the floor and then they actually have a lot to say. But look for nonverbal collaboration, right? Non-linguistic. The other thing is you said personality types, and I think there are, and I did a little thought experiment right at the very beginning when we did this. Someone said, so will Agile take over the world? And so what Agile brings along with it intrinsically is ambiguity, uncertainty, and flux. I'm sorry, it does, right? Now, what are people's tolerance for ambiguity, uncertainty, and flux? Well, you got the Gaussian curve, right? So some people have a high tolerance and hunger for it, and some are like, hate it, hate it, hate it. I know people, like, if stuff is not laid out straight and reliable, I know people like, do not change anything. I want everything to stay exactly the same, right? You know these people, right? Are they going to ever do Agile? Not on your life, right? So you've got now, let's just be generous and say 15% of the people, it's not that much, but 15% of people have a decent appetite for ambiguity, uncertainty, flux communication. That's called for by Agile. Let's say we show it's advantageous or fun, we could pull in 25%, 30%. Let's say we could apply corporate social pressure, squeeze the next group of people in so they kind of like have to get dragged along or they lose their jobs and get ostracized from society. We could get up to 65%, right? That leaves 35% of the people, or 25, or pick a number, we're not going to touch. And you know there's that last 15% they will have a heart attack if you bring him into any of this stuff, right? So that little thought experiment was kind of good for me because it says, yeah, this isn't going to take over the world. We're going to fill up the areas that we can fill up. Personality types. Is there anybody here from France? I like France. I go to France a lot. You from France? You live in France?
Yeah.
You did? We did? I got no memory. She even told me this morning she saw me in Paris and I already forgot. So sorry.
How could you?
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez.
I'll be in Paris in a couple of weeks. So, see, that's my luck. Anyway, but every time in France, the conversation comes back to can we do Agile in France? Because they're so hierarchical. I finally concluded the answer is no. By the way, for the country, the answer is no. Because what? Yeah, and I'm going back there, and I go there. I've been there for 4 or 5, 8 years, and every time they say, "Can we do it?" Because of the self-organization, self-management, democratic, kind of a thing. You'd think would be all French, but they are so hierarchical up in the. And I teach people to cheat legally. It's one of my games that I do, and they go, "We can't do that, Allistair. We're French. We're taught not to cheat at all, so we can't do that at all." So there's a real thing in France with this real. Actual hunger for hierarchical structures where we can't seem to break that. small companies, yeah, if you got 10, 20 people, that's fine. But when you get into a bigger company, no. So my point there is, yes, I think there are personalities, situations, cultural things where you just, Japan, Kent and I were there, and they said, can we do this stuff? This was actually in 2000, it was pre-Agile, but same, no, never mind. Can we do this here? We said, well, can you co-locate? Yeah. Can you pair? Yeah. Can you do TDD? Yeah. We went down this list of stuff, and we were looking at each other like, it can't be this easy. And then one of us goes, can you give your boss bad news? No. Okay, sorry. And you could for sure never tell the customer. So Agile is huge about give your boss bad news, right?
Transparency.
Transparency, right. So there's three reasons. Okay, end of.
Next question. So in my organization, we've grown a lot. We're up to like 300, 400 developers, so I think 350. And we've struggled with scaling. We've done really well on projects that run like 6 months, 7 months. As soon as you get past that or get larger than, say, a team of 25, or a collection of people that make up teams that the whole thing's like 25 max. Like we'd normally have like 2 or 3 teams in that context. And so what we've run into is we've got like 7 years of experience now, data to look at. And here's what we saw. We were structured as a project-based organization, right? So to minimize dependencies and to make it easier and to kind of, our goal was, incent ownership and accountability, bring a team of people together, have them work only on that work, right? And it's going to scrum a little bit of XP. And that worked, but the problem was the software itself started to atrophy, right? Because a lot of people became tourists, right? You come in, tourists. Right? They came in, they worked in the code for a while, they didn't fully understand it, so they didn't necessarily, it didn't grow in a coherent direction, it grew in however the hell they thought to grow it.
That's a great phrase.
Right, and so then so we have this problem, so now we've got a lot of kind of nasty looking code, so the next idea, that kind of came from this was we really valued teams staying together, right? And we struggle with that too, because when you have a project-based mentality, the projects, well, start to roll people off, we still need some people, and now we need some SMEs, right, yada, yada. So there's got to be a better way. So how do we keep teams together? So here's our current struggle. So now we're saying, okay, well, let's have teams that are sticky to a domain, right? So a collection of applications, right? Let's say it's shipping or logistics, whatever. And so now we have a new problem, of course, right? So as we're trying to do this, now we struggle with some of the dependencies, right? Because if I have a team working shipping and a team working in the warehouse and a team working on the e-com side, and my feature cross cuts, right? Now I've got 3 different teams all trying to pull the rope in the same direction, and we're really kind of struggling with this. So in some cases we've got leaders who are saying, well, here's what I'll do, right? I'll have feature teams that cross-cut applications, and I'll try and make sure that my architects and the teams are communicating enough so that we don't go in some stupid direction with the code, right? And then you've got others saying, well, no, actually, in my case, I think it makes more sense to go ahead and allow teams to stay together in a particular area, right? And then just worry about the coordination and manage the dependencies across the teams. So my question is, you guys have seen a lot of organizations. What advice do you have? What have you observed, right? That may help us in our struggle to kind of solve for this. I don't know that there's one answer, but what are some dimensions we look at? Right?
I would just like to empathize with you. You must feel a headache. I mean, this is really, really hard on your brain. And you start, let's say, 170 IQ, you're probably down to 130. There's a smoke coming out of your...
It's painful sometimes.
So a problem that you're dealing with is thinking that this is your responsibility. And that any way possible you can ever have enough information to make a decision with. We're working with a company that builds product lifecycle management software, and this vice president of development has gone through exactly what you said, and he's come up with the right way to organize teams and to have them structured correctly and to make sure that there's they're getting the benefit of the teams working together a long time, yet there's flexibility. And it's a brilliant thing. It's almost like a methodology. But pulled the teams together, all the developers, it was like 300 people, and we're thinking, what's going on? He said, well, we're spending about 75% of our time working dependencies. Because Not our vice president is a brilliant person, so smart, we just love him. But, you know, there are many, many circumstances that come up where this doesn't work, and that doesn't work, and that doesn't work, and that doesn't work. So one of the things that you may want to do is employ the intelligence of the people who are actually doing the work. I mean, you've got lots of ideas and themes that you want them to follow of a team that's together more works better than a team that isn't. A team that draws on expertise and can learn from the expertise is better. So you've got all sorts of thematic ideas. And you certainly want the teams to take advantage of that and to respond to that. But a lot of the ideas about the way they can best work together would be letting them flow to the objectives and the priorities of the organization. You'll find, I mean, one of the things that many small startup companies find is developers are also great consumers of the stuff that the company sells and actually know what can be better than the people who are telling them what to do. And this senior vice president never got over it because in his mind, his sole job was using his intelligence was to form the teams in the best way possible. And unfortunately, what he didn't realize is he was constraining all 300 of those people through his intelligence. He wasn't opening it up for them to participate and own what happened.
Well, which is in our case is happening. I mean, we're not telling people, hey, you must go do this. We've asked, right? We said, where would you like to work? You know, what area would you like to work in? How would you like this to work? And at the end of the day, I mean, the reason for my question is everybody's struggling. I mean, it's a good struggle, right? Because there's general agreement that the way where we were made the code base too screwed up, right? And we have to be able to do better. And now everybody's just kind of scratching their heads saying, well, you know, which way is going to work for us?
You may not want to ask because they may not believe you. You may instead want to say, boy, guys, I wish you had a smarter boss. This beats the shit out of me. You guys are going to have to figure it out. I'll be back in about a day. Can't wait to hear what you've come up with because this is just over my head. But of course, I will help you any way I can. When you ask them for something, there's always that thing of, is he really asking, or what answer does he want? And I mean, you're dealing with years and years and years of authority, dependency, relationship of people actually trusting that they can say what they want. It's just...
Okay, I'm going to take my turn.
Yep.
So I'm going to come at it from a different angle. In the early 90s, in 91, 92, I was working for IBM Consulting Group, trying to create a methodology for IBM at the time, and went around and debriefed a bunch of projects, which is, you know, the basis for everything that I know. And I ran into a couple of teams and that had organized by layer of the architecture, and that was really bad because functionality fell through the cracks and things didn't fit. And then I met some, they had organized by functionality, and that was really bad because they all had shared code. Anybody could touch any line of code, and the code looked like the refrigerator in a bachelor's apartment with smelly stuff in the back. And the thing is, nobody knew what line of code to delete. And so really, even with a 3-person team, spending, a day huddled over the screen looking for, you know, is that your code? Yeah, can we get rid of that, you know, instance variable, right? It was very, very slow. And I ran into 1 or 2, and they gave me what was, at that time, so I'm now going back 20 years, I don't know in your case, but I'm telling the stories that I've got, who said, we have a major organization on functionality to make sure nothing fits through the cracks, but we have a code ownership model so that for every module, there's a person who owns it. And so there's different conventions about who's allowed to change that line of code. Now, at some organizations, it's anybody can touch any line of code. I've heard that's the case at Facebook. In the case of extreme programming, the model was any 2 people sitting together could change any line of code because they were doing pair programming, and that already means you don't just change everything, right? So there's different ownership models. But the point is this: we want the integrity of the functionality, right? So it's a warp and weft kind of a situation, right? So you've got that. You want to make sure things don't fall through the cracks. And we did in one of my projects optimistic change. So if you if you were in a hurry, you could change it, but then you had to pass it through the owner, and the owner could refuse it, could refuse the mod, that mod. And I asked one of the team leads of about a 150-person project, what happened if every component owner said, no, you can't have it, right? It doesn't go to my component. And it was an orphan item. He says, then they make their own module, and that module belongs to that functionality, and then they own it, right? Then they own it like that. So this warp and weft thing is useful, I find. You have to have ownership in both domains. One's primary, and the functionality one seems to be the winning one to have primary. And then the other one you have to take into account. Now, when you look at Spotify, so I'll pick up Spotify,
which we've been talking a lot about. Before you go on, so when you said warp and weft, I'm a little confused on the functionality, meaning kind of cross.
Yeah, I don't know which one's a warp and which one's a weft, right? I kind of do this because like y'all know that in weaving they do this and the this, but I don't know which is the this and which one's the this.
There's a woof and a weft.
A warp and a weft, yeah. So I'm doing functionality vertically with my fingers, right? There's functions, and I'm doing components or modules horizontally.
So
and the vertical one is the dominant one, so you get the cross-functional teams. But you've got somebody has to be accountable for the integrity of any particular module or line of code, right? And so that's just an ownership model there. Is that the answer to your question?
Yeah.
Good deal.
It sounds a little like an open source.
I unfortunately know nothing about open source. I don't know warps and wefts of open source.
Well, you do have an ownership, though.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. That's correct. So, but I want to talk about Spotify for a second. I've been lucky enough to spend a couple of days in Spotify, and there's two things about that. One that's not documented in Henry Knieberg's stuff, which is the cultural aspect. So he talks about the mechanical structure of the organization, but not the cultural element, which I got to see up close. But first of all, when I looked at that, I wanted to see if they had that warp-weft thing. Sure enough, they do. They've got their squads, which are cross-functional team aimed at a piece of functionality. And then they've got their, whatever the heck the thing they call guilds, right? Which are now, you actually have three dimensions. You've got skills, right? You've got people who work on UI types of things, right? Database types of things. You've got the craft aspect you have to hold together also. And you find all three in the Spotify structural model. But again, the functionality, cross-functional teams is the dominant one. That's all I'm saying. Like, it doesn't say it answers your question. But I want to just now say this, the cultural aspect of Spotify that struck me both of the times that I was there, which is the good citizenship aspect, which has to do with dependency management. So I love, if any of you want to hire me, it's for dependency management in Agile projects, because the Agile crowd, by the way, I always say they Agilists if I'm about to disagree with them, right? And I say we Agilists if I'm about to agree. So you always know what's coming up in the sentence, whether how I say that, right? So they Agilists like to pretend that dependencies don't matter in Agile. And we've done a very good job of pushing it out, but it still matters sooner or later. And that's my new area I'm wanting to play in. So if you've got that problem, give me a call. And I'll show, and I want to play in that zone. Complicated dependencies, social dependencies, technical architectural dependencies. I got some ideas. So then I got a call from Spotify, and they said, we generally don't have dependency problems because they've done a lot of good things to get rid of it. But we've got one now, so Allistair, come on over here and help us. And we have the only distributed project they've got split across Stockholm and New York, which they normally don't ever do because they really have their house in order really well. But they're really, really big on human solutions to problems. So when I was in an offsite that they did, in every meeting they'd debate something, and somebody would put forward a process-oriented or tool-oriented solution to the problem. We ought to have something online, we ought to have a wiki for, we ought to have a rule that. Inevitably, in every meeting, a person said, why don't we just ask the people to behave better? This is in Sweden, where this is really acceptable kind of a discussion. And always the social one would just the problem would just evaporate. And I got to see this firsthand. So I go there, and I get 5 teams, and we do a quick analysis of the dependencies, and it's not too bad. And I gave my favorite answer. I said, okay, so every Monday, every week, each team lead fills in a spreadsheet. It says, Team A needs from Team B the following by this date, where the following is either a decision, API, or code. Okay? And then once a week, you have the meeting, you know, on Skype or whatever, and you go to the table and you say, Team B, can you get that to them by that date? Yes or no? And if they say no, you've got a basis for a discussion, and you go down through that. So I did all that, and they go, that's kind of cool. Now you don't have to hire me. I just gave you the answer, by the way. So, so then we went all that, and a couple of minutes later, one of them goes, why do we have the team leads like filling in the spreadsheet? Can't the team leads just send that to the other team leads? Like everybody send, you know, A sends to B, here's the stuff I'm expecting you to do by this date. And then it'll speed the meeting up. And so we go, oh, that's kind of interesting. And a couple of minutes later, one of them goes, why do we have to do this every Monday? Why doesn't the team lead A just tell team lead B, hey, you know, I need this from you, you know, can you get it to me on time? And they go, oh yeah, we could do that. So we don't need the meeting, we don't need the spreadsheet, do we? No, we just kind of talk to each other. Okay, could we do that? Yeah, all right. So well, that's kind of disappointing. That was going to be my follow-up consulting gig, right? So I let 2 months go by, and I say, okay, so they should be suffering by now, right, with whatever, because obviously they aren't going to talk to each other. I want my follow-on gig with Spotify, because I think it's way cool. So I write to them, and I say, so can I help you with the dependency problem? They go, no, we don't have a dependency problem anymore. The team leads talk to each other now, so it's done. So we don't talk about that with Spotify. Remember the collaborate part of the heart or the first value of the manifesto? We don't talk about the power of that. So when I was listening to you give your thing, you said, we've got teams that have it up, we've got the warehouse, we've got the shipping, we've got the this, we've got the that, and there's a dependency problem. Now, I don't know if you could apply the Spotify solution, but the Spotify solution is, you know, if those guys are all good corporate citizens, they'd talk to each other and kind of sort that out. And you have to watch for the rewards mechanisms you've got dropped on top of them. So that's what those are the stories I have. I'm trying to answer with stories.
The good thing about this is that you are free to try solution after solution after approach after approach after approach. And if you're using iterative incremental, you don't have a long period of time before you find out if it's working or not.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question over here, please.
Yeah, so I'm curious what you think how Agile applies to large-scale projects like 50, 100 people. So there's a lot of talk about SAFe, like some people like SAFe.
Did you say 50 or 100 people?
Yeah.
I thought you said large.
Yeah.
Well, okay, even larger.
Well,
so,
no, I mean 50 to 100 is easy. You just put them in a big ballroom like this and give them...
yeah. Okay, so whatever you consider large. So like, there's a lot of talk about SAFe and people...
Yeah, can we start with 800 people, please?
Okay, 800 people. So we got 800 people. How do you think Agile... How do you approach that with Agile, and does Agile make sense?
So I say you can't do it, but I don't give talks on it, and Ken says you can do it, and he gave a talk on it this morning.
Yeah.
So are we done with that question? No, I don't want to be too flippant. So I'll let Ken go first. He did give a talk this morning, but for someone who didn't go to your talk, maybe how would you address that?
There are many ways of doing it. When you scale, you add inefficiencies because you've got to work dependencies and you've got to spot dependencies and rectify dependencies and continually work it. The question you asked is an interesting one because you said, how do you do it with 800 people? And the question is, who said 800 people?
Well, he said 50. I pushed him up to 800.
Okay, 50 or 800. Who said you need that many people? Why don't you start, you know, in Agile in particular, with a number of teams and see whether they're as productive as they can be, creating as much value as you need, as quickly as you need, and add teams. Usually we walk into a consulting situation and they say, oh, our development organization has 900 people, so how do you use Agile with that? Flip the question and say, to optimize the value you're creating, how many teams do you need given the skills you have and the throughput you need and what you're trying to do? The other question with 800 or 900 people, like, well, geez, Obamacare, like Fighter of the Future, is how do you possibly organize that many people using waterfall? You know, what technique can you possibly have to apply that many people to a very, very large entity? The answer I gave this morning was you're starting to see in many companies overarching architectures. You know, think of an iOS with SDKs, think of the COM objects, think of all these things that create a structure that people will work against so that the dependencies become minimized. And that's an architectural or a design solution, going back into OOPSLA and all of that, objects. But it's not a, how do I take one 800-person team and turn them into an effective group? You don't.
Okay, so I'm going to play on that with Spotify was interesting. Certain things that I expect to happen did happen there, which is their architecture got convoluted and had dependencies, and they had trouble deploying. So they went through a major architectural rewrite to create an architecture that allowed them to be independent from each other. But they've basically got 300 people aiming at one screen.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went through a major overhaul of their architecture, which is a very tricky thing. I'd love to go back and do some investigation on just exactly how they pulled that off. But they did exactly what he said and created an architecture which minimized the dependencies. So that would be part one.
In the talk that I gave this morning, it was two things. Got to minimize dependencies. The more you scale, the more you have to minimize them. And if you are constantly checking in code and doing builds, that tells you for all the teams whether you have minimized the dependencies or whether you're doing a fool's errand of thinking you're doing fine, but you're really in trouble. So constantly build and see if it's been worked. And that's good 50 or 100 people. Allistair and myself kind of shrug at that because those we've seen work over and over and over again. You get up to the 800, 900, 1,500 people. What is it? I'm out at SAP with 20,000 people. And I'm like, oh my God. And they said, so how often do you do a release? Well, we're working on it. How many of your customers are using your current release? Oh, about 15% because they don't trust the new ones. And you're like, well, there's some evidence here. You know, you have a lot of domain skills, but you got too many people.
So I'm gonna come back to your question because I pushed you out of your natural question, which was 50 to 100. So 50 to 100 should be manageable. You can actually do good communication with 50 to 100 to make sure they all have a clear view of the goal. Absolutely clear view, you know, vision and values of the project should be clear to everybody. And so that kind of communication is possible into the 50 to the 100 range. Yep. And that'll help you a lot. You know, separately from the other things he said.
And don't believe that if you add another 100 people, it's going to get better.
Okay, good deal. Next question.
Yeah, we got 3
Right
4
here.
minutes.
Still over here.
One more question.
So we've heard a lot about scaling Scrum up, and from even small, mid, large organizations. Someone who's part of a startup with often a 2-person or a 3-person team. What would you say for, you know, how to go about scaling Scrum down?
Scaling Scrum down is a weird one. I remember the first time I heard Scrum can't be applied to a 3-person team because you've got a Scrum Master, you've got a coach, you've got a product owner, you've got so many people that there's nobody left to be a programmer. And I remember the first time I heard that, I went, what? So what would you say for, it seems a strange question, a 3-person team?
All you're doing is introducing the idea of allowing the person who's paying you to change their mind at regular intervals, but not so they can interrupt you. And you're allowing yourself time to focus on a problem at hand to do all the work that's there. And you're asking yourself to get back to the person who's paying you with something of value at intervals where they can say, you guys are really doing stuff that I want. You can do that with 9 people. You can do it all by yourself. When we first came up with the ideas of Scrum, it was on 1 or 2 people teams in Silicon Valley. I mean, it was what people did naturally to work with their customer who would not pay them otherwise.
That's good. I got nothing to add on that. I'll let him just end with that note. Thank you, everybody. I think we're about done, right?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck to you.